being hosted by Sharklab Malta. We're going to start the actual session in a few more moments. We'll just see if 1 or 2 more people arrive. In order to get the best out of the presentation, if I can ask you to switch to the small active speaker view, that way you will see the guest speaker Sarah speaking only, and you won't be distracted by other people. You'll also get to see the whole screen as it's shared. If you can please keep your audios muted, and through the presentation, if you can leave your videos turned off, that would be very much appreciated. If you have any questions at any point through the presentation, please feel free to type them into the chat. The chat button is located at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer questions, or Sarah will answer the questions based on the presentation at the end of the presentation that she's going to give. What do you think, Sarah? Do we want to start now? Yeah.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I would like to introduce to everyone actually here this evening, Sarah Russler, who is going to give the presentation which explains the reasoning for the campaign StopFinning EU. This is a very important campaign, and we need as many people to support this as possible. This session is being recorded, and the presentation and the recording will be available through the Sharklab Malta website from tomorrow, at a certain point tomorrow. So don't chase us if it's not there at 9 o'clock in the morning, but at some point during the day tomorrow, it will be online. And along with the links for signing the petition, which Sarah will explain in more detail as the presentation goes on. So without any more ado, I'm going to pass over to Sarah, and I look forward to listening to the presentation. Thank you, Sarah.
Perfect. All right, Greg, thank you so much for the introduction. And thanks for giving me the chance to be here tonight, because tonight we're going to do an online session talking about sharks. And whilst I would love to spend an hour, hour and a half talking about the beauty of sharks and how amazing they are, we're going to spend a lot more time looking at how sharks are doing. And I can already tell you, and you're probably aware, that sharks aren't doing particularly well. And unfortunately, that's our fault. So it's really important that we understand why the numbers are declining, because we keep hearing, yeah, numbers are going down, but why? And when we understand why, we can do something about it. And there are lots of things that we might not be able to influence, but there are some things that we can do. And one of them is the campaign StopFinning EU, which I'm going to talk about right at the end of the session. But to start off, we're going to have a quick look at what sharks actually are, why we're so fascinated with them for many centuries, and sort of what place they hold in our imagination, our values. And then we're going to look at a topic that I find particularly interesting, because I spent a lot of time working, traveling as a marine biologist. And at university, I said straight away, like, conservation, tropics, that's my topic. And I had the amazing chance to spend a lot of time in some really great countries. Spent time in Tanzania, spent time in the Caribbean, spent time in the Pacific coast, Panama, Nicaragua. I worked in Egypt, in the Red Sea, been over to Thailand. And whenever I was there, I tried to combine 2 of my passions. One is marine biology and conservation, and one is scuba diving. And whenever I arrived in a new place, one of my first questions would usually be, so sharks, where are they? Can I see them? Because that's what my divers would ask of me. And the answer was similar. Regardless of where on this planet I went, it was always, yeah, you're too late. There used to be lots of sharks. Now you have to be really, really lucky to see one. And really, that answer followed me around, be it the Red Sea, be it the Caribbean, where they just laughed at me and said, sharks here? That's not really going to happen anymore. Thailand, the same. So that was always a fairly disappointing answer. And then you start thinking, all right, so what actually happened? What's the problem? Why can I not see these sharks anymore? And then you realize, yeah, that's really bad. If you don't see sharks, that's bad for us scuba divers, because I want to see them. I want to spend my holidays diving with them. But that's not it. The main problem is that the ecosystem is suffering. So when I talk about species that are important for us, we can all agree: trees, plants, they are important for our planet, corals, seagrass, mangroves. We don't argue about them. But when you think about it, why are sharks important? And at first, a lot of people draw a blank. They're like, yeah, they're cool, but important? No, I don't think so. And that's a really big mistake. They are super important for our ecosystem. We're gonna have a look at some examples where we unfortunately learned what happens with our oceans when the sharks vanish. After that, we're gonna explore where all those threats are coming from. Why are the numbers going down? We're going to look at problems that are, targeted at sharks. We're going to look at commercial fisheries. We're going to look at the trade with shark fins, which is one of the main problems for sharks. But we're also going to look at more universal problems. We're going to have a look at the importance of marine pollution and what the consequences are of marine pollution. And we're going to have a look at the topic of climate change. Climate change is also something you maybe don't, put in relation with sharks, but in fact, climate change has a lot of effects on sharks. And then we're going to look at something that makes me very happy, something that we can do to change the situation. There are a lot of easy things that each one of us can do to make sure that our oceans, sharks, are more protected. And one of them is something really, really simple, something we can do tonight, sitting on our couch, drinking a cup of tea. It takes 20 seconds, and it literally requires a signature, but it can have a major worldwide impact on our sharks. So this is the plan for tonight. And sharks have really always been fascinating to us. We find sharks in a lot of myths, in a lot of legends. They've been part of our life for thousands of years. Maybe if you are from, say, Germany, sharks haven't been so important for us because there's just not, a lot of coast. But if you look at the island nations, if you look at Greece, if you look at Hawaii, Fiji, Polynesia, all those places, all of them incorporated sharks in their methodology in very different ways. So Greek mythology is fairly violent. All their gods, they fight all the time, and there's lots of fighting and stuff going on. And sharks have been depicted in a similar way. Most other cultures, like the seafaring nations, they saw sharks as something really positive, as a bringer of good fortune, as a bringer of luck, as a protector. In Polynesia, for example, every year you have a festival where people will go to the beach and they have a picnic and just have generally a good time. Why do they go to the beach? They want to be close to sharks because, as legend goes, if you die, your soul passes into the body of a shark, and you stay close to a particular beach that you used to visit with your family. So it's a place to, connect. There's nothing negative about sharks. Take Hawaii, for example. Some of their biggest gods, they are shark gods. They're the protector of the islands. If you are a seafarer in ancient Hawaii, you would pray to the sharks that your ship doesn't sink in a storm. And if it does, the sharks will bring you back home safely. So they haven't really been seen as something negative, something amazing, definitely, but never something that we need to be scared of. Unfortunately, that has changed in current times. Right, so it's normal to be a bit wary of shark. Like, have a look at that picture. It's an amazing animal, it's beautiful, there are lots and lots of big teeth. And our brain tells us, all right, this thing, that's much, much stronger than you. That's much, much bigger than you. And those teeth, they can hurt you. So our brain doesn't tell us to be scared or run away. all our brain does says, hey, okay, now you need to stay a little bit alert. Now you need to make sure that you know what's going on in the situation, because this is a situation that can potentially be dangerous to you. And that's a good thing. If we wouldn't have these primal fears, we wouldn't be sitting here today. If you as a newborn need to learn that darkness can potentially be dangerous, that loud noises can be bad news, or that you need to have respect when you see an animal with lots and lots of big teeth, we as a species wouldn't have survived. So it's okay. Respect for sharks is fine. I have it. Everyone should have it, definitely. The problem comes in when these primal fears are mixed with what we are doing in our media. When you look at the way that we talk about sharks, how they're portrayed in movies and literature, they're always the enemy. They're big, they're bad, they eat people. Have a look at Shark Week. Have a look at movies like Sharknado. Sharks are really depicted as a monster, and that's wrong. That's not what they are, but that's what we learn. That's what we learn from the media. That's what we learn from the people around us. When I talked to my parents about studying marine biology, my dad was shocked. He was like, "No, you're not doing that." I was like, "Why not?" And he said, "Sharks. I don't want you to go in the water and be with sharks." I was like, "Dad, you haven't even been to the ocean. You are a mountaineer. Like, what's wrong?" And he said, "Yeah, no, I've seen movies." Nah, okay, yeah, you've seen movies, but these movies have nothing to do with reality. And that's a big, big problem. And the start happened in 1957 with the movie Jaws. And I'm convinced that all of you have seen that movie. In fact, it's a great movie. For the time, looking, just like cinematographic, it was an incredible movie. Think about the music, think about, the scenes, the shark that you can't see. It was great, but it was really problematic because at that time, we didn't really know much about sharks, and in general, conservation wasn't really a hot topic. So the movie does what it wants to do. It portrays shark as an enemy, as something big, scary, dangerous, that wants to hurt us, that wants to take revenge. And there's an incredible amount of studies that show that after that movie aired in 1957, the fear of sharks skyrocketed in really unusual places. So every year in the United States, there's a census. People go to houses and ask, questions about your family, about your jobs, about your income, about your hopes and your fears, to get a bit of, insights, how the nation is ticking, what they're thinking. And before 1957, people were scared of tornadoes, of hurricanes, of droughts, of car accidents, of things from your everyday life. In 1976, this changed. The amount of people that said, yeah, my biggest fear is sharks, was incredible. They've never been to the ocean. They probably never will in their entire life. And suddenly they were scared of something that they absolutely don't understand. Visits to beaches dropped dramatically. And those people that went to beaches, they got scared. They saw sharks everywhere. It was a disaster. Marketing-wise, it was the worst thing that ever happened to sharks. In fact, the producer, Peter Benchley, actually said that he really regrets making this movie. And he spent the last few years as an advocate for sharks, saying, hey, look, I made a mistake. The way we showed the great white shark in that movie, that's wrong. I'm sorry that I put this image into your head. But the damage is done. And the damage you can still see. When I teach dive courses, we have little children and like, hey, what do you think of sharks? And some of them will be scared because the parents might be scared of them, or because they saw a scary movie. And this is something we really need to change. We need to understand that sharks are not, those killing machine monster type of things. It is completely fair to ask, are sharks dangerous? Remember our primal fear. yeah, that thing is way stronger than me. That thing can do a lot of damage to me. But is it likely to happen? Not really. So first of all, shark isn't shark. We have 50 centimeter long prickly sharks. They're the size of the arm. We have tiny dog sharks, cat sharks, or we have the big filter feeders or whale shark. He doesn't even have teeth. Like the worst thing that a whale shark can do to you is look at you. There's nothing he can do. He can't even swallow you because the throat is the size of an apple. So there are lots and lots of sharks that can never be harmful to us humans. There are some large species that could potentially, but they don't really want to because we don't fit into what they consider food, what they consider prey. Every year, there are around about 90 shark-related accidents. Of those 90, say 5 to 10 prove fatal. In fact, I've seen something really interesting today. It was in a newspaper in the US, and maybe you know, a new trend is gender reveal parties. That's when you're pregnant and your doctor tells you it's a boy or a girl. You invite all your friends and family, and then you make a big announcement. Is it a girl? Is it a boy? And before, you used to maybe bake a cake, and when you cut into the cake, it's pink or it's blue. And in recent years in the States, this has been a huge trend to make these gender reveal parties more elaborate. And they use, I don't know why, something about the culture, they love to use explosive devices, homemade fireworks. So why am I telling you this? Because this year, in the last 4 months, more people have died during a gender reveal party than in the last 2 years because of sharks. Just to put it into perspective, how unlikely it is to get into a serious accident with a shark. Of course, this number might be going up. More people are going to the ocean. Tourism is increasing. We spend more time at and in the sea, travel, transportation. Of course, we might see more accidents, but still 10 a year. And I'm sorry for all of those accidents, it's still a tiny, tiny number. All of the things that you see, sorry, go one back, hang on. Those ones, everything that you see on here is more dangerous to you than sharks would ever be. Getting out of bed in the morning, really bad idea. Lots of people die every year doing that. Opening a bottle of champagne, way more dangerous than sharks. Using a vending machine, more people die every year using a vending machine than from, a shark attack. Taking a selfie, it's way more dangerous than shark. And we do all of these things. And we don't even think about it. We don't think about it twice because there's no media portraying this as something bad. So think of Shark Week. That's coming up this summer. It's an entire week where a big media corporation is going to tell you how dangerous sharks are. Can you imagine a opening champagne bottle week? It'd be roughly the same. But this is something that happened to me a few years ago. Every year, around about 150 people die because coconuts fall on them. And I spent some time on the beach, filling dive tanks, and between filling, changing the tanks over, I had half an hour to relax. So what did I do? I lay down underneath a palm tree and fall asleep. And then I woke up because a coconut had actually fallen on my head or on my back. Luckily, it was this size, tiny. It still really, really hurt. All right, and now I had two options. I could spend the entire day being really angry, running around the beach, going to my dive center, demanding to cut down all the palm trees. Or I could think about what happened, be like, yeah, I'm pretty stupid. Like, why did I lay down underneath a palm tree with coconuts on it? That's not particularly clever. And that's the way we need to approach sharks too. We are going into their home. You always hear shark-infested waters. It's their home. That's where they live. And we are the visitors. And it's on us to behave appropriately. Right. So sharks, absolutely fascinating. And they've been around for a long, long time. we find the first group of sharks in the fossil record about 450 million years ago. That's an incredible number. It's really hard for us to work with that number. To put it into perspective, trees haven't even evolved at that point yet. Trees are younger than sharks. Every single plant you see on land is younger than sharks. Turtles, way younger than sharks. Any kind of land animal, we humans, all of this hasn't been around very long. Sharks have. They have survived 5 mass extinctions. They survived big impact when all the dinosaurs died. They've survived lots and lots of stuff. And now they are in danger because right now we are in the 6th big mass extinction. And this one carries our name. This one is caused by humans, not by an asteroid, not by changes in the climate, not because Earth's magnetic field is changing, but because we are destroying this planet and we are destroying our oceans. And honestly, I don't want to be, part of the species that is the reason why we're going to lose sharks. That'd be really a shame. So let's not do this, okay? Right. Right now, we have around about 500 different species of sharks. There's an incredible amount of biodiversity here. We find sharks in pretty much every single marine habitat, be it the shallow coasts, be it the deep sea, miles and miles deep, be it the tropical waters of, the Red Sea of Indonesia, be it the polar regions of Greenland. They can be absolutely tiny, can be 50 centimeters long, can be huge, like a whale shark, up to 18 meters. They're completely different in some aspects. They even breathe differently. Sharks have different breathing methods, reproduction, and different ways to reproduce. Some reproduce similar to we do. They produce live youngs, others lay eggs. They eat completely different things. We have our typical predator that preys on big fish, on big mammals. You have filter feeders that feed on tiny microscopic phytoplankton. You have sharks that are bottom feeders that they go and hunt for mussels. All of these things are adaptations to different ecological niches. And because they had 450 million years, that's the reason why we can find sharks pretty much everywhere. But they retained some similarities. Those 3 similarities. They grow incredibly slowly. They reach sexual maturity very late in life, and they only produce very few offsprings. And those are the reasons why sharks are so endangered. When we're talking about growing, sharks, they grow their entire life. It's semi-fast until they reach sexual maturity, then they will slow down, but they will continue growing. And in those early stages of life, they have more predators, more natural predators, because they're small and not so well adapted to life yet. But that's normal. It's okay that younger sharks get eaten by mainly other sharks. That's just part of the the balance of nature. Sexual maturity is the age where sharks can reproduce for the first time. For males, it's generally earlier. For females, it takes a few more years. For a great white, for example, the males can start reproducing when they reach around about 26 years. Females, 33. So that's really old. Compare that to us humans. A lot of people reproduce much younger than 33 years. Whale sharks, similar ages. Tiger sharks. Really depends on the species. And then it takes them a lot of time to carry their young. Also much longer than it takes, the mammals that we know. Great white sharks, 1.5 years. Dogfish, 22 months on average. There are some deep sea sharks with a gestation period of 33 months. All the ladies sitting here that already have a baby, imagine being pregnant for 33 months. That's a long time. And then they have very little offspring. So obviously, if the gestation period is 18 months, they're not going to produce young every year. Normally, they produce young every 3 years on average. The number of offspring varies depending on species. Some of them are more fortunate. We're talking about maybe 200 per litter. But have a look at the sound tiger shark. That's 1 or 2 offspring every mating season, every 3 years. So not a lot of sharks come into existence. This one is an incredible case. That's a shark we don't know that much about, but we've been talking about that species a little bit more in recent years. That's the Greenland shark, the shark living in the cold waters of the Atlantic, Greenland, Canada. And not so much is known about it because that's not really an area where research has been focused until they figured out a really astonishing fact about these sharks. Greenland sharks live up to 500 years. Again, that's a big number, tricky for us to comprehend. I'm sure you read Shakespeare, probably in school when you learned English, somebody forced you to read A Midsummer Night's Dream or Romeo and Juliet. This shark was around, the one you see on that picture, there was around when Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. That's an incredible long life. It's not even comparable to the lifespan of mammals on land. They have to survive for 150 years before they can reproduce for the first time. So that was okay. They lived in an area with very few predators and everything was fine. It was as a balance. It was no problem that it took those sharks a long time to reproduce. And now we come in there and we've been hunting these animals. And the Greenland shark is threatened with extinction. Not a surprise, because if it takes so long to reproduce and we keep putting sharks more and more out of the water, the numbers are going down. And this is what happens with pretty much all of the species. If you really want to break it down and put it into very simple words, we are putting more sharks of our sea that they can produce offspring. That's the main problem for the whole thing. Populations are steadily declining. Always tricky to judge by really how much. There are numbers out there that species have been declining up to 90%. What we can say definitely is that pretty much all species are going rapidly down. And now it's completely fair to say, why do I care? Maybe you're not a diver. Maybe you're scared of sharks because you saw jaws when you were young. Don't really care. But that's not really clever because it's a really big problem if we lose our sharks. Because A, it's a shame. They are amazing. They've been around for 450 million years. It'd be a shame if they vanish from our planet. And we don't live in the world of Jurassic Park. When the last whale shark dies, that's it. They're gone and they will never come back. And that's a scenario I don't even want to think about. And if you still say, well, I don't care, then think about the money. Sharks are incredibly valuable. Shark tourism is increasing tremendously. Lots and lots of money is spent every year by divers, by snorkelers, by general tourists to fly into the most remote locations on our planet just to get a chance to see sharks, maybe go diving with them, go cage diving, go snorkeling with whale sharks, whatever. It's a huge money-making industry. And mainly, not so much developed regions, they benefit from it. So my first job after university, I lived on an island called Mafia Island, just off Tanzania. And back then, Mafia was not really developed. We didn't even have a road. So in rainy season, you're stuck in your town, and that's pretty much it. Electricity, yeah, sort of hot water, no, definitely not. That kind of place. And they have the really good fortunes that they have in winter a resident population of whale sharks. And the WWF is doing incredible work on Mafia Island. And they, together with the local community, built a very sustainable model of shark tourism. One that A, makes it easy for the WWF to protect and to study sharks, and one that allows the local people to earn a lot of money. And in recent years, a road has been built, a hospital has been built, The school is actually a school now. When I was there, they didn't even have a proper roof. So shark tourism can do lots of good in lots of regions where industry isn't such a big topic. But frankly, the reason why sharks are important is because they are a big part of the ecosystem. So sharks are apex predators. That means that they are right on top of the food chain. Sharks don't have a lot of natural predators. When you talk about a really big species, there's not much that will eat a great white shark. Maybe other great white sharks, maybe an orca, but it's pretty much it. And as such, they have a really important role in the ecosystem. They make sure that the ecosystem stays in equilibrium, that the balance that has naturally evolved stays. They control the populations below them. They control the population size of their prey. And they do something else. And that's, for us humans, a bit more tricky to understand. You have a finite amount of resources on land or in the sea. And evolution wants to, keep going. Point of evolution is that the strong and healthy ones use those resources so they can reproduce. So sharks actually do evolution a favor because they feed on the weak and on the sick fish animals and remove them from the general population because they can't reproduce or wouldn't produce really good offspring. They just waste resources. Again, for us humans, it's always a bit tricky to get our head around, but this is how nature works. And this is a really important job that sharks do. So let's have a look what happens when we take sharks away. And I wish that the following scenarios are fantasy, but they're not. They're things that we actually seen in the wild. And most of the time, we connected the dots long after the fact happened. We're talking here about the domino effect. The domino effect is a concept in conservation. It means that all elements of the ecosystem are connected. Maybe not directly, maybe not one-on-one, but through different steps. It's like a house of cards. If you take out any of those cards, the whole thing is going to come tumbling down. And that happens in the ecosystem when you remove one of its components. We've seen that on land. This is when we started thinking about conservation as conserving the entire ecosystem. We've seen in America and the United States, in the national parks, that when we take out all the wolves, because we don't like wolves, they might be dangerous, similar to sharks, that we don't get any new trees growing. Why? Because if you take out the wolves, their prey, they're going to like it, And what are they going to do? They're going to eat all the trees. And that's one of those domino effects. Yeah, the wolves don't actually have anything to do with the trees, but all the deer that suddenly start, surviving, reproducing because their predator has been removed, they will eat all those trees, and suddenly we don't have any forest anymore. In the marine environment, you can see something similar. When we go to California, we have incredible kelp forests, beautiful brown macroalgae growing really big, growing really fast. They're like type of coral reef ecosystem just for cold water. And then we started removing all the otters because we like their fur. Currently, it's really nice, and some people like to make jackets out of it at coats. So we removed all the otters, and suddenly the kelp was gone as well. Why? How do they fit in with each other? That's easy. Otters eat sea urchins. Sea urchins eat kelp. If I take out the otters, the sea urchins will reproduce dramatically, and all those new sea urchins will eat all the kelp because the system has lost its balance. And once we've noticed these things, once we started to be aware of the domino effect, we're like, all right, let's have a look what's going on in our ocean. And the first example brings us to the Caribbean. Caribbean is an incredible territory. Spent a lot of time in the Dominican Republic, I spent a lot of time on Cuba, and the ecosystem is beautiful, but also very, very destroyed. Why? Right. So you have a lot of fishing pressure on sharks. We're talking about reef sharks. They're easy to hunt. They're very easy target, and they've been hunted relentlessly over the last few decades. Populations have been drastically declining. And in fact, when I went to the Dominican Republic and to Cuba, both of them, and asked about sharks, people just laughed at me and said, yeah, maybe 20 years ago. Now, just forget about it. So one thing was quite happy about that. And then were groupers. Groupers, big fish, the one you see on the right, they are the main prey of sharks. So if the predator is gone, the prey starts to be really, really happy. So groupers started to multiply drastically because nothing was eating them anymore. Consequence is that when I suddenly have lots of groupers, in turn, their prey is going to suffer. And their prey consists of herbivores, like the parrotfish that you see here. So suddenly there were no herbivores anymore. Parrotfish were just gone because they were all eaten by the groupers. And that has a really, really bad consequence for coral reefs because herbivores keep the coral reef clean. So a reef needs a structure. There needs to be a dead coral, there needs to be rock, something solid. And then new coral can grow on that solid underground. But it needs to be clean. You know, if it's covered in algae, nothing new can grow on it. And that's the job of the herbivores. They keep all that underground, all those rocks, the substratum, they keep it clean because they feed on those algae. Look at the picture on the right. You see in parrotfish when you were diving or snorkeling, you sometimes think, all right, yeah, they eat coral. No, they don't. They eat the algae that's growing on a hard substratum. And if these herbivores are gone, the algae can spread. And that's what they do. They spread very fast and they take over the entire reef. And that's the consequence. If the reef is covered in algae, no new coral can grow. They can't grow any larger and nothing new can settle down. And after a while, the entire ecosystem will collapse because coral break off quite naturally. Wave action, because of currents, because maybe a turtle swam into a reef, because a diver didn't watch where their fins were. And then bits and bits of coral break off. Again, that's normal, that's okay if new corals can grow. But if the reef is covered in algae, nothing new can grow. And after a while, the entire system breaks down and all you have left is what you see on the right picture. It's just a heap of rubble, a heap of dead, broken coral. There are no holes, there are no caves, there are no overhangs. There's nothing that fish or other reef inhabitants can use to live, to hide, to reproduce in, to seek shelter, to eat. That's all gone, and the biodiversity goes down drastically. And we've seen this trend across the entire Caribbean because we took out all the sharks. And it took a long, long time to understand this connection. And unfortunately, we only understood it when it was already too late. Something similar, in a way, happened in the North Atlantic. So we're at the end of last century, 90s, and we started hunting sharks without end. They died because we wanted their meat, because we wanted their fins, or they died because of bycatch. Shark populations declined by over 50%, and the consequences were dramatic, and we can feel them to this day. Why? Because somebody was happy again. Their prey, of course. In this case, not groupers, but rays. Cow-nosed rays without end drastically, and suddenly we had lots and lots of rays. And what do rays do? They feed on shellfish. They feed on oysters. They decimated the population completely, and the shellfish populations collapsed round about the change of the century. And it was a big problem because if you go to the North Atlantic, to say the east coast of the United States or Canada, lots and lots of communities are built on shellfish and oyster fisheries as a very lucrative industry, because those are obviously delicacies. You can sell them for lots of money to the US, Canada, to Europe even. And then suddenly the shellfish populations declined, they vanished from one year to the next. The entire industry collapsed. It took a huge human toll. People lost their livelihoods, they lost their jobs, they lost everything. There's no great social security system in the States. People started being homeless. Even to this day, you have entire towns that have just been abandoned because there was just no money to be made anymore. It was a disaster for people living in that area. It was also a disaster for our oceans. Why? So when you have lots of rays, they will spend lots of time in the seagrass because they hunt for their prey in the seagrass. They will turn over the sediment to find all the shellfish or the oysters that live there. And in that way, they're destroying the seagrass. Imagine that you go every day into your garden and just, take a shovel and dig around in your garden. The grass is never going to recover from it. Same thing happens with seagrass. And that's a problem, because seagrass is really, really important for us. Seagrass produces oxygen, quite a lot of it actually. Seagrass stores lots of carbon, which we need to fight climate change. And seagrass is used by lots and lots of fish as nursery grounds. So when the seagrass meadows vanished, like the ones in the North Atlantic, we suddenly have a really big problem, because fewer fish are going to be around. And years later, the fisheries in that area, they realized that the fish they've been targeting is going down in numbers. One of the reasons, because their nursery areas are gone. And then people noticed that the water quality is getting worse and worse and worse. Why? Oysters and shellfish filter water. They filter sediment, they filter toxins out of the water. And when you remove all of them, the water quality is going down. In fact, the water quality has never really recovered. And all of this because we got rid of sharks. So you see what I mean? When we take out sharks from the equations, the consequences are very, very far-reaching. And oftentimes it's the case that only in retrospect we're like, all right, okay, this is the connection. And this is something that happened in Australia. And this is a very curious connection, it's really interesting. In Australia, you have lots of tiger sharks. Tiger sharks, they're not an offshore species. They spend most of their lives right along the shore. They love to be in seagrass meadows. Why? Because this is where they find their prey. They hunt turtles, they hunt dugongs. Both of them we do find in seagrass meadows because that's what they eat. Okay, so when you have a dugong, the dugong will spend a lot of time in the seagrass and they try to eat the roots. They don't really care too much about the leaves, that is sort of okay. They want to go down, and this is what you do. You see it, grazing on the roots, destroying the seagrass meadow. And if that dugong would always be in the same place, that area would, after a very, very short time, be completely destroyed. And dugongs are lazy. Of course, if they have the chance, they're going to stay in the same area. They're not going to move voluntarily. And this is why we need tiger sharks. Because we can see a very clear correlation. If you have tiger sharks in the area, dugongs and green turtles move more because they're obviously they want to avoid their predator. And that leads to healthy seagrass meadows. Why? Because one day they're grazing here, tomorrow they're grazing over there, the day after tomorrow they're going to be in a completely different place. It gives seagrass time to regrow. Really, really important. Like, if a farmer would lead the sheep every day to the same meadow, well, that's not going to work for a very long time. And this is why we need tiger sharks to, take care that the dugongs and the turtles keep moving. And what did we do? You can imagine we fished all the tiger sharks from the water, and the consequences were dramatic. Consequences were that the seagrass meadows vanished. We could drastically see how the seagrass meadows declined. Obviously, consequences for oxygen production, for nursery grounds, for fish, but it also increased erosion. Why? Seagrass is a really important erosion control mechanism. Their roots, their rhizomes, their leaves, all of them trap sediment, make sure that sediment stays where it's meant to be. And if I remove, all the roots or the plants, then the sediment starts to move. And it leads in a completely different community structure on the one hand, and it leads to much more erosion. And you could actually watch beaches getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and people losing their houses because suddenly they weren't anymore on stable ground. Why? Because we removed the tiger sharks from the water. All right. So I think just by picking out those 3 examples, you've seen how intricately sharks are interwoven into the entire ocean ecosystem, how important they are for us. So let's have a look how they're doing. And unfortunately, they aren't doing particularly well. From the 500 living species, over a quarter are threatened with extinction. We have seen up to 90% population decline in the last century, and unfortunately, the trend keeps going on. Threats are really coming from all sides. It's often the characteristic species that are affected that we talk about, but it's really all species across the board. And to make it a bit easier for us, I've tried to divide the threats in 4 main categories. So we're going to have a look at the topic of fishing. We're going to have a look at the topic of marine pollution, different types that affect sharks. We're going to have a look at tourism. So this is something we have to say, okay, this might be our fault as well. And we're going to have a look at the topic of climate change. When we're talking about fishing, there are 3 main types of fishing. Every year, around about 100 million sharks are fished from our oceans. That's an incredible number. That's 33 times the amount of people living on Malta, Gozo, and Comino together. Just to put it into perspective, every single year. And that's the official number. The actual number is going to be much, much higher. A lot of scientists say we're talking about 250 million sharks every year. The problem is that fisheries are not monitored. In Europe, between 1% and 3% of fisheries are monitored. The rest, we don't really know what's going on. We have no idea what they're pulling out of the oceans. We have no idea what's going on with the topic of bycatch. And in other parts of the world, it's even worse. All right, and these are the types of fishing we're going to talk about. We have the commercial fishing, when we really target the shark. We have the topic of trophy fishing, when we also target the shark, but we don't even want to eat the animal, we just want to take a picture with it. And we have the increasing topic of bycatch. When it comes to targeted fishing, the fins are really the primary motive. There is a market for shark meat. In fact, actually increasing in Europe. It's drastically increasing in South America, but really the fins are still the big problem. So shark fins are used mainly for 2 reasons. We have shark fin soup and we have traditional Chinese medicine. Shark fin soup has been a status symbol for hundreds of years. Even the emperors loved to serve shark fin soup. Why? Think back of our fascination with sharks. They're big, they're strong, they're stronger than us. And if I can, defeat this animal and take it out of the water and take its fin and serve it to my guests, it's showing my guests, hey, I really spent some money on you, I spent some effort on you. And this is where this prestige came from. It kept growing and growing and growing. And unfortunately, the trend for Chinese, or the demand for dried shark fins is also increasing because the middle class in China is getting bigger. There's a lot of influx of money into China, and suddenly a lot of people can afford shark fin soup that couldn't before. and they want to show, hey, I made it. I can serve my guests, mostly for weddings, birthdays, company events. I can serve you shark fin soup. And as always, the rarer the shark, the more it's worth. The market value obviously depends on the species, but if you take the fin of a whale shark, they're talking about around about 1,000 euros per kilogram. So that's a huge, huge margin, lots of money to be made. And to be honest, it's completely pointless. Sharks are, their fins, they consist of cartilage. Cartilage is what you have in your nose. That's that stuff. It's completely flavorless. When you put dried shark fins in a soup, you get nothing taste-wise. It's all about prestige. Shark fin soup is in fact chicken soup with, I'm sure it's really tasty, but it's chicken soup with some vegetables and with cartilage. And when you put that into soup, it gets sort of a squishy texture that you can see in the picture here. To be honest, nothing I would voluntarily eat. I can't imagine it to be a particularly pleasant sensation in my mouth. But unfortunately, it's very prestigious, so people keep doing it. There have been small victories. About 10 years ago, China has officially said, hey, we're not going to serve shark fin soup for state meetings anymore. But it pretty much stopped there. Hong Kong, for example, has said, yeah, we're still doing it. And obviously, private people, they keep doing it. And they are now the main driver of the demand for dried shark fins. And now you have a second component. Now you have the topic of traditional Chinese medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine is a type of medicine that has been around for around about 2,000 years. And a really big component is the usage of plant and animal products. And oftentimes it's the case of, so if you're feeling weak and sick, you consume something that's strong, like a shark, that's powerful, to give you what you are lacking. So dried shark fins, be it in a soup, be it in a tincture, be it as a powder, they have been advertised for remedies for fatigue, for cancer, rejuvenation, and as most of the time with these things, like we know from rhinos or tigers, to cure male impotence. There are no evidence whatsoever in Western medical trials. In fact, it's not a really good idea to do any of this. We're going to talk about this later on, but just very quickly. So an apex predator is usually through the process of bioaccumulation really heavily polluted by heavy metals, by hormones, by microplastics. So actually consuming an apex predator is not a particularly great idea. Unfortunately, here as well, the trend is going up. Traditional Chinese medicine is becoming more and more popular, and because there's so much money to be made for shark fins, but the clever marketing people, they keep pushing that narrative that whatever problem you have, snort some shark fin powder and you're going to be fine. It's not going to happen, but with marketing, usually, unfortunately, it works. Shark meat, here, I really can't understand it, but the demand is also increasing. Traditionally, there has been a market in Asia for sort of larger species. Here we're talking about prestige again. In Europe, we're also eating a scarily high amount of sharks. Here, it's more the smaller species we're interested in. And a big problem, in fact, is South America. Right now, Brazil is the biggest importer of shark meat in the entire world. They're really driving the demand of shark meat. In Europe, it's been a lot of blue shark, a lot of mako shark, but a lot of dog sharks as well. Being from Germany, this is sort of what we keep eating as sharks, unfortunately. We're also a really big trading center. Some advances have been made at the beginning of the year. Spain and Portugal have actually banned catching and trading of mako sharks. And that's important because mako sharks are threatened with extinction. So we we start making steps, but the problem still persists. And doing that for us, it's just not a really good idea. As I said before, through the process of bioaccumulation, those animals right on top of the food chain, they are heavily polluted. Methyl mercury in sharks is a really dangerous thing. That's the main reason why when you're in Germany and somebody gives you Schillerlocke, which is a dog shark, please say no, it's not healthy for you. Levels of arsenic, lead, hormones, microplastic, they are all above the levels considered safe by the WHO. So there's really no need to eat shark meat because you're doing your body a disservice doing that. Trophy fishing is a problem that doesn't concern us so much, but it's still important to be aware of it because especially in the Caribbean and the US, it's a growing trend. What happens? So we see shark as an opponent, and now I want to go out there and I want to show the world that my fishing skills, my boat, my whatever is so amazing that I can take sharks out of the water. And obviously with every kind of competition, the biggest, the heaviest, or the rarest is what I want to take out of the water. Some of these tournaments, they offer a lot of money, and they also offer a lot of money for species that are threatened with extinction. And in recent years, a few of them have switched to catch and release. That means that you catch a shark, you take a picture, and you throw it back into the ocean. That's nice. That's kind of you to do that. It's pretty pointless. The official death rate during catch and release is 70% because the animal is stressed because it has to fight a lot of long time. Wounds caused by fishing hooks, by being pulled on a boat, by being exposed to the air. It's just not really good for the animal. Most of the time with these tournaments, the animals are actually killed because afterwards they're being weighed, they're being measured, pictures taken with them, and whoever takes out the largest shark usually gets a lot of money. And when you look at what kind of sharks are targeted, we have mako sharks, we have fresher sharks, we have hammerheads, we have great whites. They're all threatened with extinction. And there are people on this planet, like the gentleman on that picture, that fish those sharks just for a picture opportunity. And that's absolutely horrendous because these animals die for nothing, just for a little bit of vanity. In fact, in the US and the Gulf of Mexico, that problem is so big that a tiger shark has a chance of 1 to 6 of dying as a trophy versus dying as a victim of commercial fisheries. Just not acceptable. I'm really glad that's a trend that's not really big here in Europe, but it's a huge thing in the Caribbean. I've seen it live, unfortunately, many, many times, and it's a growing trend in lots of other places in the world too. So this is something you always need to keep in mind and something we obviously shouldn't engage in. And now let's talk about bycatch. Have a look at that picture. What can we see? We can see some shrimp. We can see some shellfish, we can see some kelp, some seagrass, some fish, we can see the shark right in the middle. What do you think? What did they want to catch? And the sad answer is the only thing those fishermen were interested in are the red shrimps you see on the bottom. All the rest is bycatch. And that's just a really nice term for rubbish, because that's what we don't want to have, and that's what we are probably going to throw back into the ocean. Bycatch is a huge problem. A quarter of what we pull out from our oceans is thrown back in after it probably already died. So a quarter of what we kill is absolute rubbish because we use non-selective fishing methods like long lines and trawling nets. Long lines are, as the name says, they're really long lines. They're actually hundreds of kilometers long. It's not a typo. I didn't mean to say hundreds of meters. I meant to say hundreds of kilometers. And those lines, they have hooks on them every few centimeters with bait. And you target fisheries like tuna with long lines, and they coincide with the migration routes of the big pelagic shark species. So once a shark is on a big migration in the open ocean, there's not so much food around. And then there's a line, some bait. It's easy for the shark to get attracted. And once the shark has eaten the bait, there's a hook in its mouth and it's caught in there. Problem is that obviously it can get eaten with other animals, it gets stressed out, injuries caused by the hook. But a big problem is the problem of suffocating. A lot of shark species, and almost all the pelagic ones, they need to move to breathe. They can't, control the movement of water across their fins if they are not actively swimming. So if they are caught in one of those lines, they can't really swim around anymore, and a lot of them suffocate. Bycatch rates, so again, rubbish that we're throwing back into the water, we're talking about 20 to 40%. And again, those are the official numbers, so you can imagine how the reality looks like. Trawling nets are even worse. They are huge nets with really wide openings. You have buoys on the top, so the opening goes up, then you have weights on the bottom. And this is what we target, use to fish, the big fisheries, like the big schools of fish, the stuff you buy in the supermarket. And obviously these big schools of fish, they attract sharks. Again, because we're in the open ocean and we have the big migratory species here. And these nets, once a swarm of fish, a school of fish has been caught, they are so densely packed with animals that sharks can't move anymore, and they will be squashed and they will suffocate. Sharks are strongly affected, turtles are affected, marine mammals are really affected. Bycatch rate officially 40%. If it's a bottom trawler for the shrimp industry, like the one we've seen in the very first picture, we're talking about a bycatch rate of 80%. Bycatch is a problem that keeps increasing because we're obviously putting more pressure on our fisheries, and we're inventing more and more efficient methods to pull fish out of the ocean. And to all of this, we add the problem of marine pollution. So any kind of pollution is bad. If it's bad for the ocean, it's going to be bad for sharks. But plastic pollution is really the main culprit here, be it packaging from land or be it fishing gear that gets left in our oceans. And these are the two main issues. Sharks and similar charismatic wildlife like turtles, like dolphins, they can get entangled in discarded fishing gear, or a more recent problem, they can feed on plastic. Entanglement, don't need to talk too much about this, you can imagine what happens. We're talking here about ghost nets. So ghost nets is fishing gear that has been discarded, either intentionally or unintentionally. Unintentionally, maybe because there's been a storm or something broke or whatever. More often than not, at some point, the fishing industry, fisherman says, right, that net, it's really old, it's broken, it's not really worth repairing it anymore, because repairing is really expensive. But also getting rid of those huge nets, it costs a lot of money. So if there's a storm, the net, it's gone, terrible, insurance gives me money. Happens more often than you think. And now you have those kilometer-long nets drifting through our oceans, doing what they were designed to do, doing what you see on that picture here. That's the Longimanus shark that got caught in a ghost net. Longimanus sharks, they need to be able to breathe, they need to swim. That shark couldn't swim anymore and he suffocated in that net. Around about 30% of the total marine pollution, plastic pollution, is discarded fishing gear. It's a massive problem because we don't even know where those big nets are and how much damage they're actually causing. And this is another really sad example. There's a picture that was taken a few years ago in Egypt. It's again a Longimanus shark, and that yellow thing around its neck, that's a neckband. The divers might recognize that. like a plastic ring you put around your neck, and at the front there's an opening where you can attach your second stage. And the diver lost it. That neckband fell into the ocean, and that shark swam into it one way or the other, probably feeding on the ground, and it laid around its neck. So we said earlier that sharks keep growing their entire life. Plastic doesn't. So this is exactly what happens. You see the shape it left, you see there's a constant wound. Wounds like that, they lead to infections, they weaken the animal, they lead to tumors. And in a delicate place like this, where the gill slits are, that can cause really, really bad effects for the animal. In fact, if this shark in that stage would have been left to its own devices, the shark would have died within a very short amount of time. In an incredible feat, those divers were actually able to cut the plastic off the shark, and we hope obviously that the shark recovered from the wounds and survived. Not a lot of sharks are lucky like that. A lot of sharks die from plastic pollution every single year, and entanglement is one of the biggest issues. But we also have the problem of feeding. That's mainly the problem for our filter feeders. We have 3 shark species that are filter feeders. It's the whale shark, it's the basking shark, and it's the megamouth shark. And they filter phytoplankton and krill and small animals out of the water. And obviously they ingest pretty much anything that's in the water, also a lot of plastic. And the problem here is that the plastic accumulates in the stomach, and normally it's not digested, obviously, and normally it's also not excreted. So it just keeps accumulating and accumulating. And at some point, that stomach is full. The animals can't eat anymore, and they will die because they can't get any nutrients anymore. We see that a lot in seabirds. We see it a lot in turtles, and we have started seeing it in mantas. We started seeing it in whale sharks. It's also an increasing problem. And the next problem when we talk about plastic pollution is the topic of microplastics. Microplastics is a topic, again, that 10 years ago we haven't really been talking about much, and it's been more and more in the media. Microplastic are tiny plastic particles. They come into existence either because bigger plastic pieces break down into even smaller pieces, or they are purposefully designed because they might be in peelings and in washing things, everything that's grainy. That's usually microplastics. But microplastics don't have to be hard. Microplastics come in gel form, wax form, and liquid form. If you go to your bathroom right now, when you're finished, and have a look at your shampoo, at your conditioner, at your toothpaste, there's going to be microplastics in it. There's a high chance there are microplastics in it. And microplastics are everywhere. They are in our drinking water. Whatever water you drink from the tap, there's plastic in there. It's in your salt. It's in your food. It's in you and me, and it's in all the fish. We don't know so much about microplastics just yet because it's a fairly recent topic. We do know that when it degrades, it's harmful to the nervous system. It's harmful to the reproductive system. The consequences we're not really sure about, but also it's too late. That microplastic is already in all of us, and it's obviously a huge, huge problem for filter feeders because they keep ingesting more and more of it. We're going to see the consequences at some point. I don't think they're going to be particularly positive. And that brings us to the topic of tourism. So I understand wanting to dive with sharks, particularly whale sharks. I've had the incredible chance to work with the WWF with whale sharks and snorkeling, and it was fantastic. And years later, I saw a whale shark in Thailand while diving. I nearly cried. It was incredible. So I get it. You want to see a whale shark and you want to snorkel with them and dive with them. That's completely fine. Do it because they are super amazing, but do it in a sustainable way. And what's happening here in this picture is not sustainable. We are in the Philippines. The region is called Oslo. And around Oslo, you sometimes see whale sharks, sometimes not. and you don't really build an industry like that. Nobody's going to fly to the Philippines because there might be the chance of a whale shark. You are going to fly to the Philippines if I can guarantee you year-round that you're going to snorkel with whale sharks. And this is what the people in Oslo realized. And about 10 years ago, they started being the main hub of the whale shark industry worldwide, because they started seeing sharks all day, every day, the entire year round. And how did that happen? They started feeding them. They started arriving every morning, and they started feeding the sharks with frozen shrimp. And obviously the sharks realized, hey, there's food and I don't even need to move. In fact, the whale sharks from Oslo, they don't really swim that much anymore. They arrive in the morning and they hang like this in the water, like a 45-degree angle, and they're gonna open their mouth, like you see in the picture, and the fishermen are going to throw frozen shrimp in there, and that's at first great for the shark because yay, free food. And they stayed there. Over the last few years, we could see that the sharks have been coming there regularly. They either changed their migration patterns, spent more time in Oslo, or they stopped migrating altogether and now spend the time there year-round. And that obviously meant for the tourism industry that, yay, we can advertise with whale sharks guaranteed, and people started flocking to Oslo and giving the fishermen lots and lots of money to dive and snorkel with whale sharks. Unfortunately, the industry is very poorly regulated. So there's an international code of conduct, how to swim or dive with whale sharks. And this picture shows you that nobody cares about this code of conduct. The boats need to be 15 meters away from a whale shark, one boat per shark, a maximum of 15 people in the water, at least 3 meters away. Look at the picture, it's a disaster. It's not happening there. Nobody cares about the shark. People just care about the animals. And in fact, it's really bad for the sharks because frozen shrimp are not part of their diet. They are lacking a lot of nutrients. We can see that the sharks aren't growing enough, as much as they would do if they would be their normal, their natural food. They are weaker, they have more infections, and they don't live that long. They have changed their migration pattern, which is always bad when it comes to reproduction, because you're reducing the amount of genetic material you put into the population. They change their behavior. Like, it's not natural to see a whale shark like this in the water. It's not nice. That's not how they're meant to be. And the biggest problem comes from injuries. And this is how whale sharks around Oslo look like. They have their fins chopped off by boat motors. They are injured by people that got water with them. I'm sure there are some operators that try to be responsible, but the majority is not. And the sharks really are suffering. So this is not an industry we should support. So if you want to dive with a particular species, if you want to have a certain encounter, do your research. There are lots and lots of places around this planet where you can dive with whale sharks. Maybe it's not 100%, but often it's 99% guaranteed. And honestly, those 99%, they are better at seeing the animals with their natural behavior in their natural habitat than seeing them like this in the water, not moving. And with this, we come to our last problem. We come to the problem of climate change. And when we talk about climate change, I think we can all agree that it's a big problem, and it's our problem. It's a man-made problem. Around 200 years ago, we changed the way we live. We went away from agriculture. We went away from, handmade production, individual production, to industrialization. We started building huge factories, and we started producing things in ginormous quantities. And to do this, we need energy. And we get this energy by burning fossil fuels, by burning coal, gas, oil. And when you burn them, yeah, you get energy, but you're also releasing lots of pollutants. One of them is CO2, and we're also releasing lots of greenhouse gases. And they accumulate in our atmosphere. and that leads to an increase in temperature across the entire planet. And also all the things that accumulate in the atmosphere, they are also released into our oceans. So climate change really has two main effects in our oceans. A, the water temperatures rise, just as the temperature on land, and the ocean gets more acidic. Why? If you have lots of CO2 in the atmosphere, it dissolves into our oceans and it changes the pH level of the water. So it goes lower and lower, and the ocean gets more sour, more acidic. And these are the consequences. So we can see that in the last 7 years, and it's really not a long time, great white sharks have shifted their territories towards the poles, so going north or south by over 600 kilometers in only 7 years, because in their usual territory, it's getting too warm for them. They don't like that heat. And that obviously has massive, far-reaching consequences, because suddenly great white sharks are missing in the tropics, and they are appearing in territories where they shouldn't really be. It's changed community structure completely, and it's an ongoing problem because the sharks, the warmer it gets, they're going to keep migrating north and south. When we're talking about egg-laying shark species, we're also seeing a really bad trend. So around 40% of all shark species lay eggs. Just like a chicken egg, you can imagine them. You have your egg yolk, and you have fetus that feeds on that yolk until it's grown, until it hatches. Perfect, how it's meant to be. So scientists have wondered what happens when the water temperature keeps increasing. They've taken egg-laying species of sharks, they put them in an aquarium, and they simulated the water temperatures expected at the end of the century. That's in 18 years. That might be a long time for you and me, but our children, they're going to be alive. So that's not that far in the future. And what they've seen is that those embryos, those baby sharks, they keep feeding faster and faster on that egg yolk, the warmer the water gets. And that's a big problem, because those sharks, they hatch way too early, they are not developed properly, they hatch weakened, and they hatch hungry. You can imagine that none of these things are a particularly great start into life. So we can assume that more sharks are not going to hatch. There's going to be hatchling failures, and the hatchlings are going to have a much higher level of predation. So another reason why shark populations are going to go down. And then we're talking about ocean acidification. That's something you sometimes hear when we're talking about coral reefs, when we talk about clownfish. That's been like a poster child for the problems associated with ocean acidification. But ocean acidification is also going to have a big effect on sharks. Why? Because their teeth and their scales are going to corrode if the oceans get too sour. There have been studies about it. It's already happening. The structures are weaker and weaker. For some species, that might not be a problem. Sort of the bottom-dwelling species, slower species, for them, it's probably going to be okay. For the big species that need their teeth and that need a specific form of scale to be hydrodynamic, that's going to be a huge impact. They're going to need more energy to swim. They're going to need more energy to hunt, more energy to feed, and they're not going to be as effective as predators as they are right now. Again, we're going to see the consequences when more studies are done, and most of the time when the problem has already happened. But we can already say that climate change is going to have a massive impact on shark populations. All right, and now we talked about all the problems sharks face. Let's have a look what we can do against them. Right. The easiest is obviously avoiding any kind of shark product, the topic of sustainable tourism, and something we can always do. We can actually get active and take an interest. Avoiding shark products is fairly easy. There is still a very huge industry selling shark teeth, jaws, shark liver. I've seen shark embryos in resin sold in a souvenir shop at some point. Not sure why anyone would buy that, but it is a huge industry. And if we stop supporting that industry is going to stop, because if there's no money to be made, sharks are going to be targeted less. If you do want to give somebody a shark-related product, please do so in a sustainable way. The best way is usually adopt a shark. Like this, you can support a charity of your choice, Sharklab Malta, for example, and you adopt a shark for them and you support them in their work that they are doing, and you can give somebody an amazing gift. I personally just got given as a gift a manta ray. He's called Baba Ganoush and he's swimming around the Maldives. And I used to have an adoption for a whale shark called Bajaji. And frankly, those are amazing shark presents. And if you know somebody that loves sharks, adopt them a shark. They're going to be super happy about it. They're going to be way more happy than about some strange, morbid souvenir. And then last year, suddenly we started talking about how sharks are going to vanish from our planet and how the COVID I think the number that they said was 500 million, something like that. Sharks are going to die because of the COVID-19 vaccine. Why? Because in shark livers, you find a chemical compound called squalene. It's a compound used in cosmetics and in some vaccines. There is a plant-based alternative, but when we're talking about cosmetics, some companies like to advertise with real shark. Obviously, those you can just avoid. Just don't buy them. There's squalene in them. And it's not actually said, hey, it's plant-based. Just avoid them. When it comes to vaccines, I have some good news. None of the vaccines for COVID-19 licensed in the EU contain squalene. So if you get offered shot, you can gladly take it and you know you haven't harmed any sharks. Unfortunately, in the Chinese, the Russian, and probably the Indian vaccine, they do contain squalene from sharks, but they're not going to be licensed in the EU. So that's something you don't have to worry about too much. But it's always nice, to keep in your head, if your cosmetics say squalene, just avoid it, buy something else, find an alternative. When it comes to sustainable tourism, that's probably the easiest. Stay informed. Have a look where you can dive with, a dive operator that actually cares about the environment. Inform yourself, ask questions, and if something happens that you don't like, you see that the animals aren't treated well, that the dive guys don't give you decent briefing, whatever, go somewhere else. Vote with your wallet and spend your money only there where you know that the tour operators actually care about the environment. And now we're coming to a point that's very, very close to my heart, and I hope that all of you will support me in this, because there's very little that we can, as individuals, do to support sharks. If you and me, we're not going to solve the problem of climate change. We're not going to solve the problematic of bycatch. We're not going to change the topic of marine pollution. We can take steps, and we should all take steps to make sure that our planet is protected. But still, we as individuals, we have very little power. Apart from this one, we can actually change the fate of lots of sharks within the European Union by supporting this initiative. It's called StopFinningEU, Stop the Trade. It's a registered EU petition, and we're trying to save sharks, not just in the EU, but worldwide. So we said before that around 100 million sharks die every year, mainly for sale for shark fin soup and traditional Chinese medicine. So the shark fins are super profitable. There are high margins on it. Meat, not so much. So now the fishing industry actually does something that's absolutely barbaric. They do something that's called shark finning. If you haven't heard of it, I'm sorry to inform you about it, because it's horrendous that people do this. They will take the shark out of the water, and they will try to maximize the space on the boat because space is obviously limited, and they will take what's valuable, the fins, and they will discard what's not valuable, that's the rest of the animal. So a shark is caught, the fins are cut off the animal because we want to save time. That usually happens when the animal is still alive. The animal is then thrown back into the ocean, and now there are three options. Either it's going to die because it loses blood, it's going to be eaten by another predator, or depending on what shark species we're talking about, the shark is going to suffocate because they can't swim anymore. As I said, that practice is called shark finning. It's actually banned in European waters. 10 years ago, there's been a convention and they banned shark finning, but it still happens a lot. Spain, the Azores, Portugal, it's very widespread. I've seen horrendous videos, I've seen horrendous pictures. And anyway, as soon as you arrive on land, as soon as you arrive in the harbor, you can legally cut the fins of the animal. And now it gets tricky because we don't know if it happened on the ocean, did it happen on land. We just know it happens a lot. And the thing is, Europe is the main trading center for shark fins. We produce a lot of them, and the ones that we don't produce, we import from, say, the Caribbean, from South America. Trinidad and Tobago is one of the leading producers of shark fins, and they will import them into Europe. We will transport them, and then we will export them to Asia. And this is a huge money-making industry that's absolutely not regulated. We have no idea what's going on. We keep finding huge amount of shark fins at Frankfurt Airport, London Airport, whatever, and we need to stop that problem. And this is what we're trying to do to StopFinning EU. This is a European Citizens Initiative, which means we're not talking about a Facebook petition, okay? This is something that is registered with the European Commission. And now we have 1 year to gather 1 million signatures. And if you manage to gather 1 million signatures, the European Commission has to discuss what we are proposing. And we are proposing to extend the protection of sharks in European waters. The fins need to be naturally attached until the shark is landed now. And we want to change this so that the fins have to be naturally attached. So on the shark, when you import, transport, or export any kind of shark fins. And this would make the trade so unprofitable that it would just simply stop. Because you're not going to transport a 5 kilogram shark from the Azores across Frankfurt. There's no money to be made. So changing culture is really difficult. Going over to Asia and talking about traditional Chinese medicine or shark fin soup, that's tricky. That's going to take many, many generations. What we can change is commerce. What we can change is money. And if no money is to be made anymore, the trade with shark fins across Europe is going to stop. So we need in total 1 million votes. Currently, we have just over 200,000. We have time to collect the remaining votes until the 31st of January next year. And the thing is, we need 1 million votes, but we also need for the countries a specific number. And for Malta, that number is tiny. We need 4,500 votes of people with a Maltese citizenship. So if you live there, it doesn't count. Like if you only live there, it counts for your nationality. So we need nationals of Malta. Obviously, please vote regardless of your nationality if you are a European EU citizen. If you're British, you can relax. You can have a cup of tea and you can be proud because you had a very similar petition last year and you managed to get enough votes. It's already been to Parliament. They have said shark finning is horrendous and we are going to do something about it. They are a bit busy with Brexit and everything at the moment, but the notion has been there. Obviously, keep up to date with it. Like if you haven't by the end of the year heard anything about it, maybe ask your MP. Send them an email, send them a letter, be like, hey, you guys discussed it. What's the change of law? What's actually happening? So you know, you're not clear just yet, but you've already reached a milestone that your counterparts within the EU haven't reached yet. So this is where we need to work together. If you haven't signed yet yourself, then please do it. Go to StopFinning EU. There is a direct link to the European servers. We're going to post the data. It's also a Facebook post. We're going to put it on the website of Sharklab Malta. You go there and you sign online. Depending on where you're from, they're going to ask your name. They might ask your email address. They might ask your physical address. They might ask for your ID number. It depends on which country you're from. Normally, voting age is 18. For Maltese national, it's 16. Okay, and you've seen how many more votes we need. Please vote yourself, but spread the word. Talk to your friends about it. Talk to your family about it. Post it on social media. If you know any companies that might be interested in supporting the initiative, talk to them, talk to Sharklab Malta, talk to me. Because this is a unique chance. There's political power and and is something that the European Commission has to discuss, a total ban of shark fin trade. Obviously, we've spoken to members of the European Commission, chances that ban to be completely to actually do something for once. Let's do it. Get involved, spread the word. I'm sure it's still going to be a long, long way to get all the votes necessary, but we can make it. And then we've done already a big step with the sharks, because sharks are going to be caught less in Europe because of the microchip anymore. But shark catching around the entire world is going to go down because of the guys in Trinidad and Tobago have no way to get the fins to Asia because you can't transport them via Europe, but they're not going to fish the sharks anymore, are they? Please support StopFinning EU. Talk to us about it if you like. My side, a huge thank you to all of you for taking huge thank you, Greg and Sharklab Malta. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah, for a very informative presentation. We did say at the beginning of the presentation that if anybody had any questions to type them into the chat. And nobody's actually typed anything into the chat, and unfortunately we're actually very, very low on time. If anybody does have any questions and you want to type them in, we will get back to each individual from the chat itself.
Hi, Greg. Hi.
Hi, Serena. Nice to see you.
How are you? I'm fine, thanks. And very great meeting today about shark, because I remember when I was in 2018 and I was a volunteer in an association in Microcosms about turtles, because the people, they take turtles, okay, and the turtles, they have a problematic inside, and in Microcosms there is people, and they help turtles with rehabilitation for the sea. And I remember you explained me with Natalie about Shark in Malta 2018, you remember? As I remember, it's very great meeting today. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Serena, for your comments. I would say, unfortunately, because we're a little bit short on time now, if anybody does have any questions, you can post the question in the chat. We will recover the question and answer you individually.
Greg, you can check the chat already. There we have some questions if you want.
Okay, so Morgan, I didn't understand why there were less seagrass and when there is more rays and less shellfish. Okay, it's all to do with the trophic chain. So when you take out one animal, its normal prey becomes more abundant, which in turn now has a detrimental effect on the prey species. As Sarah pointed out, this can be reflected in many different examples. Rays eat shellfish. So if there is a sudden increase in rays, there's a sudden decrease in shellfish, and the prey that the shellfish would normally feed upon becomes more abundant. So it's a chain reaction. Okay. We can explain that to you in a little bit more detail personally as well next time we see each other. So that's fine. Zachary, you posted. I mean, Sarah. So feel free to actually come in and answer anything here. So Zachary said, you've constantly made reference to Asia as an offender of the practice of shark finning. Do you think that the reason for this is that in Asia, the cultures of those countries are less likely?
Hi, ihr Lieben, es tut mir leid, ich bin rausgeflogen. Hey everyone, I'm so sorry, I got kicked off my internet.
It's okay, no problem. Okay, so we're just looking at one or two questions, Sarah. So there's a question in the chat that you constantly made reference to Asia as an offender of practice of shark finning.
Yeah.
Do you think the reason for this is that in Asia, the cultures of those countries are less likely and less open to change their practice than in Western culture?
Honestly, changing culture is always really difficult. It takes a lot of time, and obviously you're talking about issues that you can only really think about when you have a fairly high standard of living. So thinking about conservation, thinking about nature, about sustainability, it's fairly easy when you are, when you have everything, when you're not hungry, when you know you have education, when you know you have healthcare, when you know you have social mobility. When you're from areas where those things aren't necessarily a given, these things become a problem, because we are raised with the issue of sustainability. We know that marine pollution is an issue from a very, very young age. We teach our children. And in some cultures, it's not yet part of the curriculum that you teach. And obviously, when we're talking about Asia, a place that's very, very deep in my heart, culture is more important than it is for us. Maybe because I'm German, it's again a little bit of difference, but we aren't really proud of our history. I'm not going to be there like, hey, I'm German. It's nothing, it's not part of my identity. In Asia, it's different. You have a culture that goes back thousands of years. We're talking about emperors that have been, the same lineage for 3,000 of years. So that heritage, that culture is more interwoven with your own personality. So changing this is very tricky, and it's always tricky coming in as an outsider and saying, yeah, that's not really good what you're doing. Especially in cultures where saving face is really important. So saving face is a cultural aspect. You don't want to sort of seen as doing something wrong, as a weakness, as it's a cultural aspect that's very foreign to us. It's something I struggled with when I lived in Asia, because for me it's normal to say, yeah, I messed up, sorry. That's not so normal in that culture. And changing that is going to take a lot of effort. And there are efforts, if you look at what Sea Shepherd is doing, they're trying to do that in a very aggressive way. And it's not working, because you can't go somewhere and say, yeah, from my point of view, that's rubbish. You're never going to convince somebody doing that. That's when you go to Japan and say, hey, I know it's been in your culture for thousands of years to catch whales, but you need to stop because we say so. It's not going to work like that. So in what we can do right now is change the supply, because we're talking about money when we talk about Europe. In Europe, nobody catches sharks because it's been part of our history for thousands of years. Like, think about the UK. Think about fish and chips. Before, fish and chips used to be often shark meat. And now it's not anymore, because the supply is just not there anymore. Nobody cares about it, because we just don't have those cultural values. Like, we want to eat fish and chips because they're super tasty. What's actually in it, I don't know, like put some vinegar on it, I'm gonna like it. It's really tricky. So it's not, you know, I always feel really conflicted when I do this session, because you don't want to portray like an area of the world as the bad person. It's not that Asia is the reason why sharks are suffering. The demand is there, but the problem is that we are supplying the demand. So when you're talking, take drugs. I mean, who's at fault? The people wanting drugs or the people supplying them? What we normally do is we prosecute the supplier, and this is what we should do in Europe as well. We supply shark fins because we want to make money, because the margins are gigantic. And this is the point where we can say, stop. If we change those margins, the people in Europe, in the Caribbean, wherever, they're going to stop catching sharks because they're not going to make money anymore. It's tricky.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah, for a very comprehensive answer. Hopefully, Zachary, that answered your question. We also explored and expanded on some other issues in the same area.
Cool.
As far as I'm aware, that's all of the questions that have been posted in the chat. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating. More information on the StopFinning EU campaign will be available as the recording for the session plus the presentation from tonight on the Sharklab Malta website. And we really strongly urge you, as Sarah did in the presentation, for you to actually sign the petition, and not only sign it, but also to share the link and encourage friends, relatives, and other like-minded people that want to see sharks, in the water for a lot longer and being trapped with the respect that they deserve in their ocean environment. So from myself and Sharklab, again, I would like to thank Sarah very much for a very detailed presentation. I thank everybody for actually attending this evening, and thank you for supporting Sharklab Malta, and we look forward to seeing you at another open session or at an event when we can hold public events. But keep in touch, keep an eye on the Facebook, keep an eye on the social media, see what we're up to. And when you have the opportunity, please get involved. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thanks.